He looked at her with contempt and shouted, "I don't want you here anymore." After years of marriage, the husband expelled his own wife only because she began to age. Humiliated and with nowhere to go, she left in tears. But when a medical examination of him revealed a cruel and ironic detail, everyone was in shock, and nothing would be the same as before. At the luxury office in Manhattan, Thomas was waiting for the results of routine tests. He was sitting in the Italian leather chair, his arms crossed, showing off the defined muscles that he was so proud of. At 58, her body was a sculpted work of art with years of obsessive dedication. Tanned skin, dyed black hair, voluminous biceps marking the tight polo shirt. Everything in him screamed manufactured youth, built perfection. Dr. Harrison entered the room with a briefcase in his hands. His face was tense, his eyes avoided direct contact. "Thomas, I need you to come back alone so we can talk. It's important." Thomas frowned, but soon relaxed his countenance. "Of course, doctor. It must be just the usual routine, right?" "My exams are always perfect." The doctor did not answer. He just nodded and left the room, leaving a heavy silence in the air. Thomas stood up, walked to the mirror on the wall, and admired himself. He ran his hand over his defined abdomen, smiled, satisfied. 58 years old and looking 35. That was discipline, effort, commitment. He was living proof that age was just a number for those who dedicated themselves. He took out his cell phone and opened Instagram. The last photo he had posted had almost 50,000 likes. He next to Amber, his girlfriend of 28 years, both in gym clothes, sculpted bodies, perfect smiles. The comments were all complimentary. "Perfect couple. Life goals. You are beautiful." Thomas smiled, reading every word. That was the life he deserved, the life he had built, not that other, the old one, the one he had left behind. Margaret popped into his mind for a second. The image of her leaving the house with a suitcase in her hand, her face swollen from crying, the grey hair that she no longer hid. Thomas pursed his lips, pushing away the memory. No, he had done the right thing. Margaret let herself grow old. He stopped taking care of himself. He developed arthritis and used that as an excuse for everything. He needed someone who was on the same level as him, someone who valued himself. The phone rang. It was Amber. "Honey, did it end there? We're going to have dinner at the new restaurant, remember?" "Not yet, baby. But soon I leave. I'll pick you up in an hour." "It doesn't take long, okay? I want to post a photo on the stories." "That place is very chic." Thomas hung up, smiling. Amber was perfect. Young, beautiful, full of energy. Everything Margaret was no more. 3 months ago, he had kicked Margaret out of the house. 32 years of marriage thrown away like garbage. The scene still echoed in his memory, but without regret. He was in the living room, sitting on the couch, when she came home from physiotherapy. Margaret walked slowly, her hands swollen with arthritis, her face tired. "Thomas, I need to talk to you about the bills. Expenses have increased a lot and, Margaret, I'm done." She stopped, looked at him confused. "Tired of what?" "From you. Of all this. You let yourself grow old. Look at you, look at me. We don't match anymore." The words came out cold, calculated. Margaret turned pale, her hands shaking. "Thomas, what are you saying? We have been married for over 30 years. I helped you build all of this. I took care of our children while you worked. And I thank you for that. But it's over. I deserve to be with someone who takes care of themselves, who values themselves. You don't do that anymore. I have arthritis, Thomas. It's not a lack of will, it's a disease. Sorry, it's time to move on alone." Margaret tried to argue, to beg, to explain, but Thomas was relentless. Within a week, she was out of the house, living in a tiny apartment in the suburbs, while he paraded Amber on social media, at events, at dinner parties. Thomas's children reacted exactly as he expected. They sided with him. After all, he was the successful, the rich, the influential. Margaret was only her mother who got carried away by age. Back in the office, Thomas was interrupted by the secretary. "Mr. Thomas, Dr. Harrison has asked you to return tomorrow at 10 a.m. alone, please." "Of course." "No problem." Thomas left the office calm, confident. He had no idea what hurricane was about to come crashing down on his perfect life. But to understand how Thomas got here, we need to go back in time. Going back to when everything was different, when he was just a personal trainer struggling to make ends meet, and when Margaret was the woman who believed him when no one else did. 35 years ago, Thomas was 23 years old and working as a personal trainer at a small gym in the Bronx. He earned little, lived in an apartment shared with two other boys, barely had money to eat properly. But he had a dream, to open his own chain of gyms. It was on one of these work mornings that Margaret showed up. She was 21 years old, worked as a secretary in an accounting firm, and wanted to start training. She was beautiful, friendly, with a smile that lit up the environment. Thomas offered to be her personal trainer. In the first days, the conversation was only about training. But soon they started talking about life, about dreams, about the future. "I want to have my own chain of gyms one day," Thomas said, his eyes shining with excitement. Margaret smiled. "I believe you'll make it. Do you really think so?" "I'm sure. You are dedicated, intelligent, hardworking. It just needs a chance." Those words touched Thomas in a way he had never felt before. Margaret believed him. Really, they started dating 3 months later. Thomas had never met anyone like her. Margaret was different from the other girls he knew. She didn't care about appearances, status, money. She saw the human being behind the body. She saw the potential. She saw the heart. 2 years later, they got married. The ceremony was simple in a small church with few guests. Margaret wore a white dress bought at a department store. Thomas wore the only suit he had. But they were happy, radiant, in love. Soon came the children. First Lucas, then Amanda, and finally Julia. Margaret left her job to care for the children full-time. Thomas worked 18 hours a day, took every client he could, saved every penny. It was Margaret who invested her savings in his first business. $10,000 that she had saved over the years. Thomas used the money to open a small gym with used but functional equipment. "Are you sure of that, Margaret?" "It's all your money," Thomas asked, almost feeling guilty. "I'm sure. I believe in you." In the early years it was tough. Very hard. The gym was barely profitable. Thomas worked non-stop, came home exhausted, often slept on the couch because he didn't even have the energy to go up the stairs. Margaret took care of the children, the bills, the house, everything. She never complained. He never charged. He never threw the money he had invested in his face. It was just there, firm like a pillar. And then, little by little, the business began to grow. Thomas opened a second academy, then a third, then a fourth. Within 10 years, he had a network of 15 elite gyms scattered across New York and surrounding cities. The money started to come in. A lot of money. Thomas bought a mansion, imported cars, designer clothes, and he began to invest heavily in his own appearance. Plastic surgeries, aesthetic treatments, extreme diets. He was obsessed with keeping his body perfect, with defying time. Margaret tried to keep up. She also started training more, taking care of her diet, doing treatments. But at age 50, her body began to change in ways she couldn't control. The skin became more flaccid, the hair began to turn gray, wrinkles appeared around the eyes, and then came the arthritis. First, it was a mild pain in my hands. Then it got worse. Fingers swelled. Movements were limited. Even simple tasks became difficult. Margaret started physiotherapy, taking medication, but the disease was chronic and progressive. Thomas began to treat her differently. He, who had always been affectionate, became cold, far, critical. "Margaret, you can't let this get you down. You have to keep training. Thomas, I can barely hold the weights. Hands hurt a lot. So do another type of exercise. You can't use that as an excuse. It's not an excuse, it's a disease. Everyone has problems. You can't get carried away." Margaret felt every word like a stab. The man she loved, who she had helped build everything, was turning his back on her at a time when she needed support most. The children, influenced by their father, also began to distance themselves. Lucas was always traveling. He barely called his mother. Amanda was obsessed with her own career and appearance, and saw Margaret as an example of what she didn't want to become. Julia, the youngest, still had some contact, but her preference for her father was clear. And then Thomas met Amber. She was an instructor at one of his gyms. 28 years old, athlete's body, influencer on social networks. Everything Thomas idolized. They started training together, then going out for work lunches. Then Thomas started arriving home later and later. And then, finally, he decided that he didn't want to live that life anymore. Margaret was in the kitchen preparing dinner when he arrived with a hard expression on his face. "Margaret, we need to talk." She turned off the stove, wiped her hands on her apron, and turned to him. "I want a divorce." The words fell like a bomb. Margaret was paralyzed, her eyes wide. "What? Why?" "Because it doesn't work anymore. We grew in different directions. I want someone who is on the same level as me. Thomas, I helped you build all of this. I invested in you when no one else believed. I took care of our children, our house, you. And now you want to discard me because I'm getting older? It's not about getting older. It's about taking care of yourself. You got carried away, Margaret. I have a disease. Arthritis is not a choice. There's always an excuse." Margaret felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. That cold, cruel, insensitive man was not the Thomas she had known. Or maybe it was exactly who he had always been, and she just never wanted to see it. 3 days later, Thomas kicked Margaret out of the house. He publicly humiliated her, posted photos with Amber on social media, and made it clear to everyone that he had moved on. Margaret moved into a small apartment in the suburbs. Alone, abandoned, despised, but there was something inside her that still resisted, a force that Thomas would never be able to destroy. Back in the present, Thomas walked into Dr. Harrison's office at exactly 10 a.m. He was confident, calm. Amber had spent the night at his mansion, and he had woken up feeling on top of the world. Dr. Harrison was sitting behind the desk, his expression grave. He pointed to the chair ahead. "Sit down, Thomas. You can talk, doctor." "I'm already prepared to hear that my exams are perfect, as always," Thomas said with a smug smile. The doctor took a deep breath. His fingers drummed nervously over the briefcase. "Thomas, the results of your exams are not good." Thomas's smile slowly faded. "What do you mean?" "We found significant neurological changes. We did more tests, consulted experts, and we arrived at a diagnosis." Thomas leaned forward, his heart starting to beat faster. "What diagnosis?" Dr. Harrison opened the folder, showing medical reports, graphs, images. "You have familial Creutzfeldt-Jakob syndrome. It is a rare, genetic, progressive, and irreversible neurodegenerative disease." The words sounded distant, as if they came from far away. Thomas blinked several times, trying to process. I didn't understand." "What does that mean?" "It means that your brain is starting to degenerate in an accelerated way. This disease affects motor coordination, memory, speech, all cognitive functions, and it progresses quickly. But there's treatment, right? Surgery, medicine, I don't know. I have money, I can pay whatever it takes." Dr. Harrison nodded slowly. "There is no cure, Thomas. There is no effective treatment that significantly slows progression. In less than a year, you will completely lose motor coordination. Your memory will deteriorate. You will lose the ability to speak, to walk, to do anything on your own. Eventually, all the functions of the body will fail." The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas stood still, his eyes fixed on the doctor as if waiting for him to say it was a joke. "No, it cannot be. I take care of myself. I train every day. I eat right. I do everything right. This disease is genetic. It has nothing to do with lifestyle. You were born with this predisposition." And now she has spoken out. Thomas brought his hands to his face, his fingers trembling. For the first time in decades, he felt fear. Real fear. How much time do I have? It is difficult to predict exactly, but usually the symptoms worsen quickly in the first 6 months. After that, it's a matter of time. Thomas staggered out of the office. He got in the car, closed the door, and stood there. His hands clutched at the wheel, his eyes fixed on the void. He, Thomas, the man who had built an empire on eternal youth, on physical perfection, on the cult of the body, was about to age in a brutal and accelerated way. The irony was devastating. He picked up his phone with shaking hands and called Amber. "Hi, love, how are you?" "Amber, I need to tell you something." "Speak up, baby." Thomas hesitated, but then the words came out. "I'm sick. Very sick." On the other end of the line, silence was followed by an impatient sigh. "Sick how?" "I have a neurological disease. I'm going to need help. I'm going to need care." Another silence, longer, colder. "Thomas, look. I like you, but I can't handle it right now. My career is taking off. I have commitments, trips. I didn't sign a contract to take care of an old man." The words were like a punch in the stomach. "Amber, sorry, but it's better that we end here. Good luck with everything." She hung up. Thomas stared at his phone, incredulous. 3 months of relationship thrown away in 30 seconds, so without ceremony, without compassion. In the following days, the symptoms began to appear. Tremors in the hands, memory lapses, difficulty maintaining balance during workouts. Thomas tried to hide it, but it was impossible. One day he was recording a video for Instagram when his hand shook so much that he dropped his phone. "Damn it!" he shouted, frustrated. He tried again, and again the hand trembled. He gave up. She sat on the floor of the gym and began to cry. For the first time in years, Thomas cried, "Because I need to tell you something important. I'm sick, very sick." Lucas crossed his arms, his expression impassive. "Sick how?" "I have a neurodegenerative disease. Creutzfeldt-Jakob is... It is serious. I'm going to need help in the coming months." Amanda exchanged a quick glance with Lucas. Julia lowered her eyes, uncomfortable. "How much time do you have?" asked Lucas, his voice cold, almost businesslike. "Doctors said it's a matter of months, maybe a year." Silence. Amanda was the first to speak. "Dad, we need to talk about the inheritance, about the company, about how things will look when you can't manage everything anymore." Thomas felt his heart tighten. Inheritance, that's what they were thinking about. Not in helping him, not in staying by his side, in cash. "Amanda, did I just say I'm dying and you're worried about inheritance?" "Dad, we need to be practical. You have always taught us that." "It's no use getting emotional. It's better to resolve the legal issues quickly." Lucas nodded. "I agree. And another thing, Dad. We think it would be better for you to be admitted to a specialized clinic. There will be professionals to take care of you 24 hours a day. And so you don't get exposed, people talk, social networks. It's best to keep a low profile." "Discretion," Thomas repeated incredulously. "Do you want to hide me because you're ashamed of me?" Julia finally spoke, her voice low. "That's not it, Dad. It's just that it would be more comfortable for everyone." Thomas looked at the 3 children he had raised, who had supported, who had given everything. "And all I saw were strangers, cold, selfish, cruel people. People that he himself had molded in his image and likeness." "Get out," Thomas said, his voice trembling. "Get out of my house. Dad, you don't have to. I told you to leave." The 3 got up and left in silence. Lucas even mumbled something about talking when he was calmer, but Thomas didn't even listen. He was alone, completely alone. Over the next few weeks, the symptoms worsened. Thomas began to have difficulty training. Their movements became uncoordinated. He dropped weights, tripped over his own feet, forgot exercises he had been doing for decades. Gym employees began to notice. Whispers spread. Soon, customers began to cancel private lessons with him. His image of perfection was crumbling before everyone's eyes. One night, Thomas was alone in the mansion, staring into the bedroom mirror. The man who saw reflected was no longer the same. His eyes were sunken, his skin pale, his hands trembled constantly. He tried to lift a 5-kilogram dumbbell that he kept in his room. He could barely hold it. No, it can't be like that," he murmured, tears streaming down his face. It was in this moment of utter despair that Margaret popped into his mind. Margaret, the woman he had expelled, the woman he had humiliated, the woman who had been by his side for 32 years and whom he had discarded as garbage. Thomas picked up his phone with trembling hands and looked up her number. He hesitated for a moment, but fear, despair, loneliness spoke louder. He called 2 touches, 3, 4. "Hello?" Margaret's voice. Thomas felt a lump in his throat. "Margaret, it's me." Silence on the other side. A long, heavy silence. "What do you want, Thomas?" I need to see you, please." "Why?" "So I'm sick, Margaret. Very sick, and I need help." Another silence. Margaret took a deep breath. "Where are you?" "In the mansion." "Wow. My mansion. I'm going there. But I don't promise anything." Thomas hung up and collapsed on the couch, sobbing. For the first time in months, he felt a glimmer of hope. Margaret had always been good. She had always been compassionate. Maybe she would forgive. Maybe she would come back. 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Thomas got up with difficulty and went to the door. When he opened it, he saw Margaret standing in the doorway. She was different, thinner. Her hair was completely grey, without dye, wrinkles around her eyes that she no longer tried to hide. But there was something on his face that Thomas didn't expect to see. Serenity, peace, like she'd found something he never would have. "Come in," Thomas said, his voice faint. Margaret entered slowly, looking around. The house where he had lived for years, which he had helped pay for, which he had taken care of. Now it seemed strange, cold, empty. What was it that you wanted, Thomas? He guided her into the living room and sat on the couch. Margaret remained standing, her arms crossed. I'm sick. I have a neurodegenerative disease. I'm going to die. In less than a year. Margaret showed no emotion. He just nodded. I'm sorry for that. Amber left me. The boys only want to know about the inheritance. I'm alone, Margaret. Completely alone. And what did you call me here for? Thomas took a deep breath. The next few words were the hardest he had ever said in his life. I want you to come back. Take care of me. You've always been good at it. He always took care of me, the boys, the house. I need you. Margaret was silent for a few seconds. Then she stepped forward and looked deep into his eyes. Thomas, you kicked me out of the house because I was getting older. You humiliated me. He despised me. He treated me like garbage after 32 years of marriage. And now that you're dying, that you're in need of care, do you want me to come back? Margaret, you don't want my company, Thomas. You want a nurse. You don't love me. You never loved. You're just afraid of being alone with your choices. Thomas felt the tears return. He fell to his knees in front of her, his trembling hands grabbing the hem of her pants. Please, Margaret, please, I beg you. I'm going to change. I'm going to be different. Just give me one more chance. Margaret looked at the devastated man on the ground, the man who had expelled her, the man who had humiliated her, and he didn't feel sorry. He felt something deeper. He felt freedom. No, Thomas, I'm not going back. Thomas remained on his knees on the floor, his eyes wide with despair. Margaret, I'm begging. For the love we had. For the years we spent together. For the children we raise. Margaret stepped back a step, freeing the hem of her pants from his hands. Thomas, do you want to talk about the love we had? So let's talk. I loved you when you had nothing. I invested my savings in your dream. I took care of our children while you worked. I stayed up all nights waiting for you to come back. I managed the house, the bills, everything. And when you got rich, when you became famous, what did you do? She paused, her eyes teary but her voice firm. You started to despise me. Every wrinkle that appeared on my face was a cause for criticism. Every pound I gained was a reason for humiliation. When I developed arthritis and could barely hold things back, you said I was using excuses. He treated me as if I were an old piece of furniture that no longer matched the new decor. Thomas tried to speak, but Margaret raised her hand, silencing him. And you know what hurts the most? You kicked me out of the house, and 3 days later you were parading your 28-year-old girlfriend on social media, as if our 32 years together meant nothing. Like I don't mean anything. I know I was wrong, Margaret. I know, but I need you now. You don't need me, Thomas. You need someone to take care of you, and you can hire that. You have the money for that, but they won't love me. They won't take care of me with affection. Margaret gave a bitter laugh. And do you think I'm going? After all you've done, do you really think I'm going to come back here? Clean your saliva, change your diapers, feed you, bathe you, and do all this with love. Thomas lowered his head, sobbing. I'm going to visit you, Thomas. Yes, I will. But like any human being would visit another who is suffering. With basic compassion. But not as his wife. Not as your caregiver. And definitely not like the woman you discarded when she needed you the most. Margaret, please. In the last 3 months, Thomas, I have done something I haven't done in years. I took care of myself. Really. Not the way you wanted, trying to look younger, trying to be perfect, but in the way that matters. I started therapy. I reconnected with friends I had abandoned for you. I discovered who I am beyond being Thomas's wife. She walked to the door, but before leaving, she turned one last time. And you know what? I feel free. For the first time in decades, I feel free. You did me a favor when you kicked me out of here. You have freed me from a prison that I have built around myself. Margaret, don't leave. It doesn't leave me alone. You're not alone, Thomas. You have your children. You have your money. You have your mansion. You have everything you have valued your whole life. Enjoy. And with these words, Margaret left, closing the door softly behind her. Thomas stood there on his knees on the living room floor, alone. Completely alone. The following months were a nightmare. Thomas was forced to hire professional nurses and caregivers, strange people who came in and out of his house, who helped him get dressed, eat, bathe, people who were paid to take care of him, but who had no emotional connection. The tremors in his hands worsened. He started knocking things over constantly. Glasses, plates, even the TV remote was difficult to hold. Memory lapses have become more frequent. Sometimes he forgot where he was. Other times he forgot his own name. One morning, he looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the reflection. "Who are you?" he asked to himself, confused. The motor coordination gradually went away. First, he stopped being able to train. Then he stopped being able to walk without support. Then he stopped being able to walk completely. He started using a wheelchair. Lucas, Amanda, and Julia rarely appeared. When they showed up, it was always with lawyers, papers, documents. They wanted to secure their share of the inheritance. They wanted to make sure everything was in order. "Dad, did you sign here?" Lucas asked, pushing papers in front of him. Thomas, his hands trembling, could barely hold the pen. I don't understand what's written." "You don't need to understand. Just sign." And Thomas signed. Because I was tired. Because he was alone. Because I had no more strength to fight. Amber never showed any sign of life again. He blocked his number everywhere. He deleted all photos of the two on social networks. As if Thomas had never existed. But while Thomas languished in his empty mansion, surrounded by paid nurses and luxury furniture, Margaret flourished. She started a blog called Aging with Dignity. In it, he shared his story. He talked about the abusive relationship he had experienced, about how she had been discarded for aging, about how he found the strength to start over. The blog exploded. Thousands of women identified with her story, women who had also been discarded by husbands who exchanged them for younger versions, women who had also been humiliated by aging. Margaret began to give lectures. He has appeared on podcasts. She was interviewed in magazines. His message was simple but powerful. You are worth more than your appearance. You are worth more than your age. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not for what you look like. In one of the lectures, a woman in the audience raised her hand and asked, "How did you manage to forgive your ex-husband?" Margaret smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "I didn't forgive. Not yet. Maybe you'll never forgive completely. But I learned to move on without letting anger consume me. I learned that the best revenge is not to hate those who hurt you. It's living well despite what they've done to you." The audience gave a standing ovation. In Thomas's last lucid months, he discovered Margaret's blog. One of the nurses left his cell phone open and he saw it. He read every word. He saw the photos of her smiling, confident, free. He saw the comments of thousands of people thanking him for his courage, and Thomas finally understood. He understood what he had lost. She understood that true beauty was not in the muscles, in the wrinkle-free skin, in the dyed hair. It was in the soul, in character, in the ability to love unconditionally. But it was too late. Thomas tried to call Margaret one last time. His hands trembled so much that he could barely dial the number. When she answered, he tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. The disease had already affected his speech. "Hello?" Thomas asked Margaret on the other end. He tried again. He got only an unintelligible murmur. "Thomas, are you okay? Do you want me to go there?" He wanted to say yes. He wanted to say, "Please come." I wanted to say, "I'm sorry." But he couldn't. The words were trapped inside him, inaccessible. Margaret waited a few seconds and then said, her voice soft, "I'm going to visit you tomorrow, okay? I'll take a book and read it to you. I know you liked it when I read it." Thomas felt the tears flow. Tears of gratitude, of regret, of pain. The next day, Margaret showed up. He brought a book of poetry and sat next to his wheelchair. He read it for an hour. Thomas just listened, his eyes closed, his tears streaming silently. When she finished, she got up to leave. But first she leaned over and kissed his forehead. "I'm still angry with you, Thomas. It still hurts. But you are the father of my children. It's someone I've loved for many years. So I'm going to keep visiting. Not by you, but for me, because it makes me feel at peace." Thomas tried to smile. A crooked, awkward smile, but a smile. Margaret left the mansion and got into her car. He took a deep breath. It still hurt. It still hurt. But she was fine. He was rebuilding his life. He was discovering that he was stronger than he imagined. As he drove back to his apartment, he looked up at the sky and muttered, "It's never too late to start over." 6 months later, Thomas passed away. The funeral was small. Lucas, Amanda, and Julia were there, more concerned with the reading of the will than with anything else. Some employees of the gym showed up, but few friends. few who really cared. Margaret was also there, not in the front row, but in the back of the church. She didn't cry. He just stood there in silence, thinking about everything he had experienced, everything he had lost, all he had won. When everyone left, she walked to the coffin. She looked at Thomas's face, now at peace, without pain, without suffering. "You wasted it, Thomas," she whispered. "You had everything. You had a family that loved you. I had a wife who believed in you. But you chose vanity. He chose superficiality. And he died alone." She placed a white rose over the coffin and left the church. Outside, the sun shone brightly. Margaret lifted her face, feeling the warmth on her skin, and smiled. She was 56 years old. He had arthritis in his hands. He had grey hair and wrinkles around his eyes, but for the first time in decades she felt beautiful. Because true beauty was not in the reflection of the mirror. I was in the strength to start over, in the courage to value oneself, in self-love that no one could take away. Margaret got into her car and drove off. I had a lecture to give in the afternoon. I had a blog to update. He had a life to live. And as she drove, she thought of all the women who, like her, had been discarded, humiliated, despised. And he felt that his mission was clear, to show them that it was possible to be reborn, that it was possible to flourish, that it was possible, yes, to age with dignity. Thomas spent his life chasing eternal youth and died alone and miserable. Margaret embraced aging and found true freedom. In the end, poetic justice was present in the cruelest way for one, and in the most liberating way for the other. Comment "Start over." So I know you've made it to the end of this story, and mark your comment with a beautiful heart. And just like Thomas and Margaret's story, I have another exciting narrative to share with you. Just click on the video that is now appearing on your screen and embark on another exciting story. A big kiss, and I'll wait for you there.